She works 10 hours today. She will work 10 hours tomorrow. She has been working 10 hours most days for the last 11 years, in the kind of Japanese professional environment that the rest of the world uses as evidence that Japan has a work problem, and she arrives home this evening as someone who still has something left. Not much. Not the energy of someone who has done very little. But something. A quality in the way she removes her shoes at the Genkan that is different from the quality of someone who has been spent entirely by what happened between 8 a.m. and 7 p.m. The 10 hours are visible. She is tired, but the tiredness is the tiredness of someone who used something, rather than the tiredness of someone who has lost something they are not sure how to get back. You are watching her from the low chair near the window. You have been calculating, since you arrived, what the difference is. She works the same hours you work. She carries the same professional load. She navigates the same kind of relentless, never quite finished quality of work that most modern jobs have. And she arrives home with a reserve that you have not had at the end of a working day in longer than you can precisely remember. Burnout has become the condition of the decade. The WHO formally classified it as a syndrome in 2019. The research is consistent. People experiencing burnout work no more hours than those who don't. The hours are not the cause, the recovery is, or more specifically, the absence of it. The work accumulates, the stress accumulates, and the body, which has been designed to discharge stress between periods of demand, never gets the interval it requires. The allostatic load rises, the reserve empties. And Monday arrives, not replenished, but simply further along, a decline that has been running since the recovery was last allowed to happen. Japan has one of the longest working cultures in the world. It also has specific, deeply embedded practices that discharge the accumulation of the workday in a way that most of the world does not. Not because Japan worked less, because Japan built the recovery into the end of the day. 20 minutes, 7 practices. The reserve she carries home tonight was built in the last 20 minutes of the day and the first 20 of the evening. Here is what those 40 minutes look like from the inside. Burnout is not tiredness. This is the confusion that sends most people toward the wrong solutions. Tiredness is the natural result of expenditure. You spend energy, you rest, you recover, you spend again. The cycle is designed to work this way. Sleep, leisure, weekends, all of these are rest mechanisms that the body knows how to use, and the body that uses them properly does not burn out. It tires, recovers, across a working life that can sustain itself indefinitely. Burnout is what happens when the recovery mechanism fails, when the rest does not restore, when the sleep does not leave you more capable than before it, when the weekend produces a Sunday evening that feels indistinguishable from Fridays, despite 2 days of ostensible rest, when the reservoir that the work draws from is being drawn from faster than it is being filled, and the gap between draw and fill has been running long enough that the deficit has become the baseline. Research on burnout consistently identifies the same root mechanism, the failure of the transition, not the number of hours. The quality of the movement between the work state and the recovery state. People who transition well, who move cleanly from one to the other, who have practices that signal to the nervous system that the work is over and the recovery has begun, sustain significantly higher workloads with significantly lower burnout risk than those who don't. The person who checks their email at 10 p.m. does not simply have a longer workday. They have a day that never ends. The nervous system, receiving work inputs at 10 p.m., does not enter recovery mode. The allostatic load does not decline. And the sleep that follows is not the sleep of someone whose nervous system had been given the conditions for recovery. It is the sleep of someone who paused mid-task. She does not check her email at 10 p.m., not because she decided not to, as a wellness intervention. Because the evening has a structure that makes the evening something other than a continuation of the work. And that structure was built not through discipline, but through 7 practices so embedded in the daily rhythm that they have become, after 11 years, simply what an evening is. Allostatic load, encountered earlier in this series in the context of the weekend, is the cumulative biological cost of chronic stress that was never fully discharged. The body's stress response was designed for acute demands followed by recovery. The cortisol rises, the body mobilizes, the demand is met, the cortisol returns to baseline. The system is elegant and resilient. What it was not designed for is the chronic, low-grade, never quite resolved stress of the modern workplace. The open items, the pending decisions, the work that is always available on the device in the pocket. Research from the University of Michigan on what scholars call the transition hypothesis has established that the quality of the work-to-home transition is a stronger predictor of burnout than either the number of hours worked or the intensity of the work itself. The person who works hard and transitions well is at lower burnout risk than the person who works moderately and transitions poorly. The mechanism is the allostatic load, the transition that allows the cortisol to decline, the parasympathetic system to activate, and the recovery physiology to begin, is the transition that keeps the reservoir filling at the rate the work draws from it. There is also the Zeigarnik effect, the documented cognitive phenomenon by which uncompleted tasks remain active in working memory until they are resolved. A workday without a formal completion signal is a workday that the brain has not yet filed as complete. It remains open in the background of every subsequent activity, drawing fractionally on the cognitive resources that the evening was supposed to be restoring. The formal ending, the physical transition, the first 20 minutes of the evening, these are not cultural habits. They are the physiological mechanisms by which the Japanese workday closes. And a workday that closes is a workday that does not keep running. She does not simply stop working. At the end of the workday, she performs a specific set of closing actions that are, in the Japanese professional context, as standard as the work itself. The desk is cleared. The items for tomorrow are placed in their designated order. The notebook is closed and set at the specific angle that means the day is done. And there is a moment, brief, deliberate, unannounced, in which she is simply present in the workspace she is about to leave, registering the completion rather than rushing past it into the commute. This is the completion ritual, the formal signal to the Zeigarnik effect that the task is finished, the open item, closed. Research on completion rituals in workplace contexts has found that brief ritualized endings, even as short as 2 minutes, significantly reduce the intrusive thoughts about work that occur during non-work hours. The brain that was given a clear signal that work is over intrudes less on the evening than the brain that walked away from an open laptop. The ritual does not require ceremony. It requires only that it be specific, repeated, and experienced as completion rather than interruption. She closes the notebook. She places the pen with a specific small precision that has become, over 11 years, not a habit but a small ceremony. The workday does not follow her to the train. The brain has been told, that is done. Within 5 minutes of arriving home, she changes her clothes. Not because the work clothes are uncomfortable, not as a practical matter of maintaining their condition, because the clothes she wears to work are not the clothes she inhabits in the evening, and the act of changing is the physical signal that the person who will inhabit the evening is not the same person who occupied the office. Age haori, the act of putting down the persona as you might put down a coat. Japan's professional culture has a long understanding of the separation between the professional self and the personal self, not as suppression or compartmentalization, but as the understanding that the evening self requires a different quality of presence than the working self. And the body, which has been dressed for work since morning, receives the changing of clothes as a signal that the self it has been supporting since morning is now permitted to rest. Research on enclothed cognition, the documented effect of clothing on cognitive and emotional state, has established that what a person wears affects how they think and feel in measurable ways. The work clothes are not neutral garments. They carry the associations of the work context, the demands, the performance, the continuous professionalism required. Changing out of them removes those associations from the body's immediate experience. She changes her clothes. She hangs the work garments with the small care of someone maintaining rather than discarding, and the person who moves through the apartment for the rest of the evening is physiologically, cognitively, slightly different from the person who came through the door. The clothes on the chair confirm it. The workday ended at the hook. There is no equivalent in the West. Not because the West lacks bathtubs, because the West uses bathtubs for cleaning, and Japan uses the ofuro for something else entirely. The ofuro is not a Western bath with the temperature turned up. It is a different practice built around a different understanding of what the body needs at the end of a working day. The ofuro runs at 40 to 41 degrees Celsius. The depth is sufficient for full immersion to the shoulders. The cleaning has already happened. In Japan, you wash and rinse before entering the bath, so the soaking is not the cleaning. The soaking is the recovery. 20 minutes of full-body immersion in water at the temperature that the parasympathetic nervous system interprets as safe, warm, non-threatening. the evolutionary signal of the heated water as comfort, as shelter, as the absence of exposure. The physiology is specific. Research on hot water immersion published in the journal Heart has found that regular bathing at temperatures above 40 degrees is associated with a 28% lower risk of cardiovascular disease and a 26% lower risk of stroke. More relevantly to the question of recovery, cortisol declines during full-body hot water immersion in a way that showering does not produce. The shower activates, the ofuro rests. The mechanism is the rapid temperature sequence. The body temperature rises during immersion. When the person exits the bath, the core temperature begins its decline, and the declining core temperature is one of the primary signals the body uses to initiate sleep physiology. The ofuro taken in the early evening does not make you sleepy immediately. It sets the body's thermoregulatory system on the trajectory that produces the deep, physiologically productive sleep that is the most powerful recovery mechanism available. She is in the ofuro for 20 minutes. She is not checking her phone. She is not reviewing the day or planning tomorrow. The hot water is doing the recovery work. Her job in these 20 minutes is only to be in it. She does not eat immediately after the bath. There is a gap, 10 minutes, perhaps 15, in which she is simply in the apartment, in the clothes she changed into, in the quiet that the ofuro produced, before the evening's next activity begins. Ma again, encountered in every context this series has visited, in the closet, in the schedule, in the silent Tuesday evening, and here again in the most ordinary possible form, the gap between the bath and the dinner, not planned as a wellness practice, present as the natural consequence of a life that has never filled every gap by default. The gap serves the transition. The body that has just completed the ofuro is in a specific physiological state, core temperature declining, parasympathetic system activated, cortisol reduced. The meal, eaten immediately, would interrupt the recovery that is currently in progress. The gap allows the recovery to complete before the next activity makes its demands. This is the smallest of the 7 habits in duration. It is among the most significant in effect, because it allows the sequence, the formal ending, the clothes change, the ofuro, the gap, to produce its full result, rather than being cut short by the next obligation. The gap is not wasted time. It is the time in which the previous investment is allowed to pay out. The dinner is the meal she ate as Ichigo Ichie. Encountered earlier in this series in the context of the Saturday lunch, the irreplaceable present moment, the meal that is only the meal, the phone in another room, and the attention given entirely to what is being eaten. Here, in the context of recovery, it carries an additional specific significance. The meal eaten with full attention activates the parasympathetic nervous system through the vagus nerve, the primary communication pathway between the gut and the brain. The attentive meal signals to the gut microbiome that the body has entered the rest and digest state, activating the digestive processes that cannot operate at full efficiency during sympathetic activation. The meal eaten while working, or while scrolling, or while reviewing the day's unresolved items does not produce this activation. She does not discuss work at dinner, not as a rule imposed from outside, but as the natural consequence of the evening's structure. By the time dinner arrives, the workday has been formally closed, physically shed, physiologically reset, and allowed to settle. There is nothing left of it that requires discussion, because it was processed and discharged before it reached the table. The dinner is what dinner has always been, the meal that ends the active day and begins the evening's rest. It cannot play this role if the work is still running alongside it. Before sleep, she does something that is not the preparation for tomorrow. It is the completion of today. 15 minutes. She reviews not what she needs to do, but what she did. The day that is ending is given the attention required to close it properly, not in the Western sense of productivity tracking or journaling, but in the simpler Japanese sense of acknowledging that something happened, that the day was inhabited, and that it is now over. This is the practice closest to Nikon, the Japanese self-reflection encountered in the Mind Detox video, but simpler and shorter. 3 questions. What happened today? What did I give to it? What is complete? The third question is the most important. What is complete, tonight, does not need to carry forward into tomorrow. The Zeigarnik effect, already addressed by the morning's completion ritual, is addressed again at night. Everything that can be closed is closed. What remains open is placed deliberately on the list for tomorrow, not left running in the background of the sleep. Research on rumination and sleep quality has established that directed reflection, structured, time-limited thinking about the day, significantly reduces the intrusive rumination that disrupts sleep, compared to unstructured worry or avoidance. The person who does the night audit sleeps into a completed day. The person who does not sleeps into an open one. She closes the notebook after 15 minutes. The day is done. The sleep will be the sleep of someone who has finished rather than paused. The last habit is not a habit at all. It is the understanding that everything preceding it was in service of. She sleeps as if sleep is the most productive thing available to her tonight, not because she has read about sleep hygiene or invested in a specific mattress, or tracked her sleep stages on a device. Because the 11 years of what precedes the sleep have produced a body whose relationship with sleep is not the relationship of someone who falls into it out of exhaustion, but of someone who enters it from a state of genuine physiological preparedness. The formal ending discharged the Zeigarnik effect. The agahori removed the work persona. The ofuro set the thermoregulatory cascade. The ma allowed the recovery to complete. The completion meal activated the parasympathetic system. The night audit closed the loop. And the sleep that arrives in the body prepared by all 7 habits is not the same sleep that arrives in the body that went from open laptop to bed via a phone scroll and a podcast. Research on recovery sleep, sleep that genuinely restores allostatic load rather than simply providing hours in the dark, has found that its quality is determined primarily by the physiological state of the person entering it. The declining core temperature, the activated parasympathetic system, the closed cognitive loops, all of these, produced by the 7 habits, are the conditions under which deep, restorative, allostatic load-reducing sleep occurs. She works 10 hours. She sleeps as recovery science. And the person who wakes tomorrow is not the person who fell into exhausted unconsciousness at the end of a day that was never formally closed. It is someone who completed yesterday and is therefore available, genuinely and physiologically, for today. You are still in the apartment. The ofuro is full. The work clothes are on the chair. The notebook is closed at the specific angle that means done. And the quality of the evening around her, the reserve she arrived home with, visible now as the unhurried quality of someone who has resources rather than the careful management of someone who is running low, has been built not by working less but by recovering more. 7 habits, 20 minutes at the end of the work and 20 minutes at the beginning of the evening. The formal ending, the completion ritual that tells the Zeigarnik effect the task is closed, the day formally done rather than interrupted. Agehaori, the clothes changed within 5 minutes of arriving home, the work persona physically set aside, the body given the signal that what comes next is different. The ofuro, 20 minutes of full-body immersion at the temperature that cortisol declines in, that the parasympathetic system activates in, that the thermoregulatory cascade for deep sleep begins in. Ma, the gap between the bath and the dinner, brief and unhurried, in which the recovery investment is allowed to complete before the next activity begins. The completion meal, dinner eaten as ichigo ichie, the vagus nerve activated, the rest and digest state deepened, the work absent from the table because it was left at the door. The night audit, 15 minutes of directed reflection that closes the open loops, places tomorrow's unfinished items deliberately on the list, and allows the sleep to be the sleep of a completed day. And sleep as recovery science, not the exhausted collapse at the end of a day that was never closed, but the physiologically prepared entry into the deep rest that only a body in the right state can access. Tonight, one thing differently. Before you leave your workspace, whether that is an office or a desk in a room in your home, take 2 minutes to formally close the day. Clear the surface, close the laptop, place one item in the specific position that means tomorrow rather than tonight, and spend 30 seconds simply present in the space you are leaving, registering that you are leaving it. That is the first habit, the one the others depend on. The workday that ends properly is the workday that does not follow you home. And the person who still has something left at the end of the day is the person who gave the recovery the same attention they gave the work. She has been doing this for 11 years. She still has something left tonight. So will you. Share this with someone who ends every week more depleted than they began it and cannot understand why. They may not have a work problem. They may have a recovery problem.